Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 8. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice, General Partner of Project Voice Capital Partners, and your host for today's roundtable discussion on conversational AI. We've got a great panel put together and certainly some interesting stories. Excited to just get on into it. And without further ado, let me introduce our panel. Roger, I'm going to start with you. Take a moment. Tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
Sounds good, Brad. Thanks for the invite, first of all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as the case may be. I'm Raj Joshi. I teach the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, a class on innovation. The exact title of the class is Strategic Management of Technology and Innovation. It's a fascinating class. Teaching some very bright, smart MBA students has been a lot of fun. Before joining Stanford, which was a couple of years ago, I was a co-founder of an enterprise AI company. And that was a fascinating journey as well. And I cut my teeth, so to speak, in the technology transformation space, working for some large technology firms. So that's my background.
Perfect. Well, we're honored to have you join us, Raj, and thank you for making the time to share your perspective and experience with us today. Next up, we have Chris Eliasmith of ABR. Chris, say hello, tell us who you're with, tell us about Applied Brain Research.
Will do. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me. Happy to be here. So my name is Chris Eliasmith. I am a professor also at the University of Waterloo, and I'm part of the Center for Theoretical Neuroscience. But in the current environment, I'm more focused on ABR, Applied Brain Research. So we are a chip company. We're, I think you could say, a software-first hardware AI company. We're very focused on edge AI. So we're building a new chip. The new chip is going to be running an algorithm that we recently discovered from looking at the brain. So it kind of came out of the lab to know how brains compute information over time. So it's very focused on what's called time series processing. Time series, or whenever the order of the data matters. So language, speech, biosignals, heartbeat detection, all kinds of things. And we're basically putting together a software hardware package which can very significantly outperform what is currently on the market. And one way to think about this is essentially, building full dialogue systems that can run in microwatts of power. These are essentially achievements that usually you have to go to the cloud for. But of course, there's lots of drawbacks always having to send data to the cloud. And so we can basically take some of the things that were only previously doable on the cloud and put them into tiny little packages in terms of resource requirements. So you can run them on wearables, you can run them on a wide variety of devices.
Awesome. Yeah, Chris, big fan of what you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to be with us as well. And next up, we have Francois Peltier of Nissan. Francois, thank you for joining us. Tell us who you are, tell us what you do, tell us who you're with.
Hey guys, yeah, great to be with you this morning or afternoon or evening, as you said, Raj. So hey, I'm surrounded by professors here, guys. So, well, I'm an external lecturer in business school, but I'm at Nissan right now. As you can hear, I'm French. I'm very, very French. Francois, you cannot do it more French, right? I've been working over 20 years in the automotive and banking industry. In multiple geographies. I worked in Europe, of course, in Asia, and in the US for more than 7 years right now. Was the previous head of open innovation based in Silicon Valley, working for the Alliance Renault Nissan, the car manufacturer. And now, I'm a chief of staff for the Americas, pushing the organization to digital transformation and trying to figure out the AI space as all the other industries are trying to. So super happy to be here. Been exposed to a lot of AI use cases, especially in autonomous driving, as you can imagine. Been also working at Stanford. Raj was at the Center of Automotive Research back in the days, trying to figure out all those ethical topics around decision-making processes for autonomous driving, right? So pretty familiar with with Stanford as well. So that's it for me. Looking forward to the discussion. Really super excited to be here.
great to have you here. And as you and I have discussed before, for many years, in fact, I remember the day that your beautiful headquarters opened in Franklin, Tennessee. I lived right down the street from you for many years. So it's great to have you on the show, and appreciate you joining us. So with that, we'll get into the news, and we've got some interesting stories here, but I think we'll spend the majority of the time on story number one, and I'm going to read this headline out loud. This is from Ars Technica. Will ChatGPT's hallucinations be allowed to ruin your life? The subheadline, earliest lawsuits reveal how AI giants likely plan to dodge defamation claims. So I'm going to go in the same order that we used for the introduction. So Raj, I'm going to start with you, and then Chris, and then Francois. Interesting piece, a little bit of a longer piece from Ars Technica, who it seems like we're on a roll with Ars Technica articles on this show. What stood out to you with this? And do you agree with the premise? Do you think that hallucinations are going to derail AI, or do you think that, or do you think they're going to derail individuals with a little bit of collateral damage, but in other, the systems will be unaffected and continue to grow? Share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a interesting story, no question. And like everything with AI, I believe it's inevitable. We are going to have such instances happen. And as long as common sense prevails, we'll be okay. My sense is that both parties need to step back and take a look at the big picture. The tech companies, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, they must devote internal resources to do a better job of addressing this particular issue. It can be addressed. There can be technical solutions. There can be policy solutions. And they do need to focus on it and keep growing the technology, of course, because I think that's inevitable. It is going to happen. But they have to acknowledge that this is an issue and tell everybody what they're doing about it. So they need to be somewhat transparent. The FTC is asking for that transparency as well. Now, on the other side, us humans, we have to also recognize that this is not perfect and will never be perfect. However, the innovation, the growth, you can't stop it. It is going to happen. And you need to use common sense. The tech companies need to create some sort of mechanism for individuals to reach out and take out the offending content quickly and then monitor it. But my sense, Bradley, that we will hear more stories until step one, the tech companies take some structured steps to deal with it. And then, of course, there should be enough awareness amongst the users that look, ChatGPT, Bard, Bing, and so on and so forth are not perfect. And they need to acknowledge that it's not just publication as step one. You have to synthesize the data, information, and validate it before you proceed with whatever you're doing with generative AI.
So, when we say the word hallucinations, right? The media has trained us to act like we're referring to something that's untrue. Like it's this Pavlovian brain association. Media says hallucinations, we're supposed to think untrue. And I think that's probably useful for the most part, but whether that's the right paradigm moving forward, I don't know. I think it's interesting just to ruminate with you for a moment, being in academia. We're in a time where what is true and untrue probably has never been more debated. We don't see eye to eye on what's true. I could say any fact I want. I could say this water bottle is safe for consumption, and I'd have some people screaming no, no it's not, and then I'd have a bunch of people saying yes it is. I mean, I could say anything I want. I could say that this device is safe for consumption, and I'd have a bunch of people saying that's false and a bunch of people saying it's true. I could say anything I want. Is it possible, before I go on to Chris and Francois, because I'll ask them the same thing, is it even possible for us to come to an agreement in this current time, on what's true and what's false, sufficient to allow AI to flourish?
It's a great question, Bradley, and there is no right or wrong answer here. It's a tricky scenario because unlike AI, humans have all kinds of different opinions on what could be deemed as truth or fact. And so the ability of us humans to have different points of views on name the topic makes us interesting. And that is never going to change. So we just have to accept the notion that there will be differing points of view no matter what. Now, the AI part of the equation, the tech companies must take all reasonable steps to ensure that their product is doing mostly right. And I think all of us need to not take life too seriously, where you immediately go to lawsuits and things of that nature, and look at the issue, the problem with a sense of, look, this is innovation, it's new, it is going to evolve, it will get better.
Well, you have a optimistic view, which I share, I might add, but it's an optimistic view. Chris, I'm coming to you. Same question. Interesting piece from Ars Technica, longer piece. Want to get your thoughts on it, and then you just heard me sort of ruminate with Raj on truth, fiction, how these things factor into what we even call hallucinations, how we even think about the term. I'd love to just hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So I think it's interesting to distinguish sort of two aspects in this story. So one is the technology, and the other is like the social consequence or the use of the technology. And the technology itself, building a model of language, is something that can be applied in many different ways. And of course, the way that NLP processing has been most famous is to essentially compress the entire internet into a big language model that we then query and answers all of our questions. But I think it's important, especially in the context of thinking about voice technology, as you do in this scenario, that you can actually get a lot of the benefits out of the technology without necessarily running into some of these social consequences if you use it in a slightly different way. So you can, for instance, build models of language and then essentially hand tune how the model is going to respond to particular kinds of questions, right? And you can essentially ensure that anything that the model says is something that has been vetted by the company that's having it say that thing. Sometimes this is really important. So, as CTO of ABR, we talk to a lot of customers, and they are trying to ensure that the experience that a user has with their product is, well-bounded, right? And so you can't ask arbitrary questions about your favorite or least favorite political party, or about, a random starlet or something. But in a particular context, they're willing to put the additional effort and time into using the same technology, but in a way that is very predictable and is something that the company is explicitly willing to endorse. And so I think we don't want to sort of, tar this approach to doing language processing or speech processing and language processing combined with a brush that says, oh, it's always going to hallucinate, or there's always going to be these kinds of problems that we see showing up that are the focus of the Ars Technica article. So that's thing number one. Something I'm really sensitive to, because, with our hardware, we are basically able to build these kinds of models extremely efficiently. You can put them in a product, it can answer all kinds of questions, and it's not going to make stuff up, right? It will answer them in the ways that somebody has told it to answer. But that has a much higher cost from an engineering perspective in some sense, which is okay if it's a constrained scenario. But then we move into the social consequence of the technology when we basically unconstrain the scenario. So now we're in the case, which is what's famous because it's intriguing, where we've essentially tried to compress the entire internet into this language model, and then we ask questions of it, and we expect it to be an oracle. So we expect it to only say true things, even though everyone knows that if you want to know true things, you don't start with the internet, right? So people facetiously say, I know it's true because I read it on the internet, right? We know that's not the case. So in some ways, this isn't a new problem, right? So for these language models to be spewing things which seem inaccurate is, to me, not a lot different than me typing in a Google search and looking through the top 10 hits and saying, oh, look, that one's wrong, right? That one's right. That one's, half right. And so, I think in some ways, this is in part answer to your questions, like, how do we deal with all this misinformation and everything that's sort of already a challenge for us to deal with? Well, it would be weird for language models to actually solve that problem, because the input to the language model is the exact data set that has all of these problems with reality built into it. So, that's sort of the perspective from, like, just, unfettering an AI technology and letting it go and do all the kinds of crazy stuff. The legal solution to that, I think Raj kind of hit the nail on the head, is that as we always rely on our legal system, it has to do something which embeds common sense, or somehow embraces the common sense that we think we should use whenever we're dealing with the information that's on the internet. And we shouldn't, expect it to always be right. We have to have some degree of, trust or lack of trust, or a certain sort of appropriate cynicism in taking the information that this model said to us to be factually true or not. And in some ways, that's the position that OpenAI has taken explicitly, right? They're like, only ever consider what's coming out of our model to be draft content. And if you are going to publish it, then you are going to be responsible for whether what it says is true or not, right? And it's not clear to me that's a unreasonable thing for them to say, because, yeah, the internet is what it is.
It's the only thing they can say, right? Like, for them, it's a convenient position. It probably is all they can say. But think about what I struggle with. I don't think that nearly enough time or energy has gone into exploring the term hallucination and what actually is going on with that, as there probably should have been. The media has its own agenda. The mainstream media, they want to put AI in a particular light, and so consequently the term hallucination needed to be defined and treated a certain way, when the reality is, I'm a human being, and if somebody asks me, what did you do 3 months ago, or better yet, I was in college 25 years ago, tell me about that. Well, all right, I was indeed in college like back then, I'll tell you about it. But as I go into that information providing sequence, everything I say is not going to be accurate. You know what I mean? Like, it's only going to be as accurate as up here can remember. There's going to be some embellishment. There's going to be some flat out things that are false. But and you could accuse me of hallucinating, from the AI point of view, but does that mean I'm not a human? No. So I don't know. I just feel like I agree with everything you said. I thought your comments were great, but I struggle with our really surface level analysis and thought process that's gone into just the concept. I'll give you 1 second to respond to that, and I'll go on to Francois.
Sure. Yeah, I think my comment about expecting these models to be oracles is kind of the same thing, right? So what you're pointing out is that fallibility is something that we shouldn't be surprised at when we talk to humans, and for some reason we're surprised at it when we talk to models, which are in some ways inspired by the way the human brain processes information. Why would we expect there have to been some magical something which suddenly made everything perfectly accurate? And maybe the reason is because, when we think about computers, we often think they just record the data and then they just spit it straight back out. But these have been explicitly designed not to do that, right? So I don't think there's any problem with calling it a hallucination in some sense, because, it is. It's basically a fact or a combination of information that isn't explicitly in the data set. But it's we can use that term for us getting stuff wrong in the past too, right? Like, where were you when the space shuttle blew up. And a lot of people say very confidently where they were, and 80% of the time they're just wrong. So would you say that's hallucination? I'm like, yeah, sure. And so, yeah, I think you're right in making this comparison, right? Saying like, yes, these models have limitations, but in fact, they're the same limitations other people have. And so when we're filtering data coming out of this thing, we might want to filter it in the same way that we filter it with other people. Now, from a technology perspective, we would like to make them experts in the things that they're talking about, right? So there is definitely lots of work that should be done. I really like companies like Anthropic that are, very focused on aligning the way the models function with the kinds of things that people care about and all these sorts of things. And yeah, I don't think in any ways it should make us stop the calls for additional resources, et cetera, going into improving these models in this way, but we also shouldn't be surprised in the way that you're commenting on.
Complete agreement. No, I think that's great. And Francois, I'm coming to you. You've heard a lot of really good comments. I want to just sort of ask you, interesting story from Ars Technica. I want to just get your thoughts in general, what stood out to you, and just your thoughts on what has stood out to you out of anything you've heard from either Roger or Chris as well.
Yeah, I don't want to paraphrase here, but I thought about you, Brad. Actually, like a month ago, I was in San Francisco and had a great discussion with the chief ethical officer of one of the major SaaS company. So coming back to Raj's comment saying that the tech companies needs to do a better job of trying to work on the models. It's good that major SaaS companies are actually making entire departments working on that, on ethics, on how to improve our models, working also with the state and federal level. There's a National Advisory AI Council right now trying to work on those topics, especially in hallucination. And I think yeah, it's even a philosophical question, the objective truth versus, yeah, you have deliberate mistakes, yeah, because basically, technically, if the model doesn't have the answer, he's just making it up, or he's sourcing data from the internet, and we all know, and Chris said it very well, it's internet, right? So to me, I think, the risk is we have in big corporation, but also in government level, a lack of education yet on on what AI is. You hear of AI all the time. You said it's the big scary thing for the media, but well, you have many different use cases on AI, and to me the risk is regulation. We don't want regulation to basically block innovation. So we want regulation to be, to make the right calls, because we need regulation. I think, when you think of the FDA, AI in the medical field, well, you could, in automotive, DOTs are really involved right now. Department of Transportation of states are really involved in, having audited systems, having, compliance rules on the way, the code is written to make sure, to ensure safety. So there is the safety, element that is, to me, is critical when it goes to social media or reputation or the example that we got in the article you were giving us. Yeah, reputation risk is a risk, but it's also a risk in everywhere. So to me, the hallucination topic is let the model improve over time. And we need to make sure that we have the proper guidelines to do so, and educate.
Think about the difference, like just from Nissan's point of view. So I see Nissan's ads all the time. I follow the company just because I lived, as I said, close to you for a long time, and I like what you do. Know people who are there, think about the difference between advertising on television or even like a corporate press release, the things that the corporate attorneys swarm over, right? So there's probably meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings about a new ad campaign, or needing to put a press release out for this, that, and the other thing that's wordsmithed and then it's wordsmithed again, and then it's wordsmithed again, and you have an hour-long meeting talking about 2 words in the you get what I'm saying, as opposed to what we're seeing with large language model based AI, where, as Chris said, this is in draft form, and take it as you see fit. Imagine if that was the standard for advertisements, where it's just, or press releases, where we're going to put this out there and you can believe it or not, but if you don't believe it, you just go verify it. How about that? So it's interesting just to think about the chasm in between these two things, where you've got corporate communications that have got the lawyers all around them, versus AI systems that don't necessarily have that infrastructure in place. And I hate to give the lawyers credit, and I'm not going to, but for the moment, I guess I'll give them a little bit, that they make things better on occasion. So I don't know. It's interesting just to think about that difference, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on from Nissan's point of view. It's a big company, it's a successful company. There's obviously a lot of systems in place to make sure things are vetted. Maybe describe the process that something like ChatGPT or these LLM based models need to get to in order to become a little bit more usable within a company like yours.
Yeah, big corporation, and actually, it's across the automotive industry. I mean, the automotive industry is a very risk-averse industry. It's like banking, right? I mean, you're playing with lives of people. I mean, you cannot say, oh, I made a car, steering wheel is not really working. Let's see how many deaths we're going to have, and we'll fix it. You can't do that. So the iteration in automotive is super hard, because we're building hardware. It's a car, right? It's manufacturing. So we know we have a lot of improvement to go, because the Rivian and the Tesla of the world, they have way more efficient process than we do as legacy OEMs. So to answer your question, I think on the AI today, we're looking at AI, and there's a lot of initiatives within the organization, AI based manufacturing, supply chain, digital marketing, purchasing. So the entire organization is today experimenting AI, right? But we need governance. And when you talk to the Ford of the world, or GM, or Mercedes, and all the other OEMs, we're trying to figure it out. So applying AI to pure research, we're pretty well advanced, especially because we're talking about concrete stuff on autonomous driving and AD4. We have several level of autonomous drive cars today, from 1 to 5. So 5 is fully autonomous. Today we are at 2.5, 3 in terms of research, like all the other OEMs, right? So that's an AI, really, research is putting a lot of money and investment and research on AI models for autonomous driving. For the, I would say the more traditional run the business, like the marketing, supply chain, electrification is going to revamp everything. You're not just going to put, an EV factory and replace your ICE vehicle factory and transform it to an EV. That's huge investments. And it's a great opportunity also for the industry to rethink completely their processes as well, right? Because you need to change it anyway. So let's change it. And today you have very basic use cases of AI, sorting screws and machines to be able to sort screws the right way, but it's very basic, to predictive maintenance on a battery health. So we are using AI today extensively in the organization, but for very specific use cases, and those initiatives are not coordinated yet, right? It's based on each functions. Today, what we're trying to do actually is building a governance around AI to scale efficiency, and go to the world is not going to wait for us, right? So we know we need to catch up on those things. But we're not that, late compared to other OEMs. We're late compared to other industries like, healthcare. Those guys are really, on AI are really, 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 really moving along. OEMs are, again, very risk-averse industry, conservative. Let's see how things are settling to be able to scale, because it's billions of investments, right?
No, I like that. And that's a perfect place to leave that. So great comments from all three of y'all. And I want to go ahead and get to the second story so we have time for the second and third. I'm going to read this headline out loud. This is from the Messenger. This was originally in Forbes, I think, but I think it was paywalled, so we use the Messenger here. Synthesia claims AI-generated avatars are taking off at Fortune 100 companies. And I think they misspelled the company name in here too, so that's not good. Synthesia's technology creates AI-generated human characters complete with a natural-sounding voice that can interact with other people. And I want to keep this short, but I want to get at something specific here, and I'm going to rotate the order. I'm going to start with Chris, and then Francois, and then Raj. Chris, Synthesia is a sexy company. They, Cubans behind them. They got a lot of momentum. It seems like they've been making a lot of waves. And then they, at this Bloomberg conference that just happened, they just announced, and the specific statistic is 47 of the Fortune 100 companies are using their technology. So my question for you is, just generally speaking, how this struck you, but I want you to give me a number. I'm going to ask all three of you for this. I want you to give me a number from 0 to 10, 0 being complete absence of any possibility, and 10 being 100% likely that in 5 years' time, we are talking about Synthesia. I think avatars, you can make a comment about avatars if you want, if we're not going to be talking about those either. But specifically, I'd like to get your thoughts on what's the likelihood we're talking about this company based on what they're doing in 5 years' time.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, my big question that is seldom addressed by articles I read about Synthesia is like, what are those companies using it for, right? So if they're using it for things like internal training because they don't have it in actors that are in the payroll of the company, and so it's good enough, and it's a little bit more engaging than if you just had a sort of a robotic voice over top of your slides, then I don't know why anyone wouldn't use it for that. It's pretty convenient, it's easy to do, and it fills a niche. If it's for being the talking face of the company or interacting directly with customers, I mean, I think that would probably be a very different use case, and there'd be a lot more concern about how that was going to impact the company's marketing and sales and communications in general. So my guess is that how they use it is going to be a big determiner to the second question about whether they'll be around or not. I think if those kind of innocuous use cases are what's the majority, and there's enough of that sort of year on year, then yeah, they'll be around in 5 years. Synthesia, whether they'll grow to sort of replace all of the spokespeople for all of the companies everywhere, I mean, probably not, right? I think that's one of those things which is not going to disappear quickly, is our desire to have celebrities come and endorse our products and all these sorts of things that have been tried and true for marketing forever. Yeah, so that's kind of my quick reaction. I did look through Synthesia's website actually a couple of weeks ago just because I thought it was an interesting use case. It's a little bit on the uncanny valley right now. So you can kind of tell, at least for some avatars, that it's computer generated, but it's a lot better than it was like a couple of years ago. So I think if they keep on that trajectory as well, then it will seem, less problematic than it might otherwise.
Let me get this straight. You looked at their website 2 weeks ago, and then you also don't know exactly what their use cases are, which I also have this problem. So it's like I struggle with how people are using. I think there's a commentary all unto itself with that, but I got to have a number. So from 0,
8,
perfect. No, and I largely agree with your comments, Francois. I'm coming to you. interesting company, interesting piece. What stood out to you, and number from 0 to 10, what's the likelihood we're hearing anything about Synthesia in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I'm pretty close to Chris, like 8, but then we need to be pragmatic on this. We have a lot of hype all over the place, right? So, 2 years ago it was the metaverse. So all the big organization corporation went into the metaverse. Oh, look, we're gonna have a great use case and everything. But today, okay, what do we have on metaverse? Okay. So if you don't have an economic value, so it's great to have an avatar. You can apply it, with a great, AI through customer service. But let's take concrete examples, for big corporation where it can bring value and efficiency. If it's just like, for, let's say, marketing purposes, I completely agree with Chris. I mean, it's way better to have, a real, football player, very, very famous star, than an avatar. So it's really, the use case is going to be really important. I think technologically, we're already there. It's just like in 5 years, we'll find the use cases to apply it, in a efficient way for an organization to, make more money, basically. Yeah, I completely agree to what Chris was saying.
So your number is 8 as well, or what? Hit us with your number.
Yeah, 8. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And Raj, I'm coming to you. Same question. Interesting company, interesting piece, interesting statistic. What stood out to you, and your number, 0 to 10? Are we going to be talking about these guys in 5 years' time?
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting company. I agree with that statement completely, Bradley. But I want to step back and ask a question that Francois also mentioned, and Chris to a certain extent as well, is the value question. Now, before you get to value, when you have innovation, it needs to drive adoption. If you don't have adoption, it doesn't matter. Now, what will drive adoption in this case? 2 things. It's really cool technology, and I'm just intrigued. I want to explore it. And I'll explore it, use it for a week or 2, a month. And then if it's not generating real value or even perceived value, I'll stop using it. This is just human behavior. And you need to also look at it from a standpoint of enterprise value and consumer value. So right now, it seems that if 40+% of the Fortune 100 are using it, I would really like to know for what purpose. So, would I like my avatar to teach my class? Heck no. I want to be the one teaching the class. The avatar will look much better, I agree, but that's why I don't want the avatar to teach my class. Nevertheless, I go back to this principle of innovation. It needs to have adoption. Adoption only happens if there's real value or perceived value. And you asked the question about 5 years from now. I will answer the question. I've been using 2030 as a key milestone in just looking at technology in general. So that's like 7 years, 6 years out. But technology and life as we know it is going to look very different by 2030. And will this technology exist in 2030? Yes. Will Synthesia be the mover and shaker, and everybody goes to them by 2030? My opinion, this is my opinion, by the way, is no. And so I'll give a 2, and would be the contrarian in the group here.
Hey, someone's got to do that, right? Yeah, so no, that's great. No, so you mentioned, enterprise and consumer value. I think, societal value gets thrown in there as well. And, here it's interesting just that none of us on this show understand what this company does. It reminds me of, when you think of other companies that no one understands what they do, sometimes those companies can be very successful. Sometimes they just sort of vanish. I could give a bunch of different examples, but it's interesting that none of us have a real good idea what they do. I think we all agree that instructional design is probably somewhere where they're being used. frequently, but outside of other use cases, I don't know. And that's interesting. But also from the standpoint of what society sits here and looks at this, I think again, blaming the media, which is an easy thing to do because they deserve it, but then also just sort of our natural paranoia. We look at stuff like what Synthesia is doing as a member of society, like it not knowing that much about any of this and saying, okay, you're going to start to replace a bunch of people with this. Is that really what we want? And asking those sorts of questions and just getting kind of apprehensive about that. And that's something that could hold this company back as well. I think that there's a big hill to climb in terms of public education, in terms of here's what this technology is, here's what it does, and here's why you don't have to be afraid. Or better yet, here's what you need to actively go and do to be less afraid. You need to be great in your job. You need to be continuously improving. You need to be focused on this, that, or the other if you're in college or higher ed, to be less, exposed risk-wise to what this technology can do. It's an immature kind of conversation, but it's interesting. And I'm getting an ad. Hang on. So Chris, I'm going to go to you. You're raising your hand.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I just wanted to make a quick sort of subtle change to us not knowing what they do. I think we know what they do. What we don't know is how they make money, right? So in some ways, the difference between the 8s and the 2s are, Francois and I think that they do have a way of making money. And we could probably, we could guess what that is, but we obviously have no confidence in our guess. And Raj is not confident that they're making money. So yeah, it's not that we don't know what they do. It's that we don't know if they're making money. We'd have to see their, books and get an understanding of, what's in their pipeline and what their clients pay and what their turnover is. There's a lot of information that you can't glean from their website.
No, you're right. And by the way, all that noise you just heard was the Apple Siri article playing an ad at maximum volume. So it's crying out to be heard here. So yeah, great comments all the way around. I will go to this third article to make sure we have time to discuss it to some degree. This is hilariously, this article is from Android Authority. The headline is Apple's Siri might not be the dumbest smart assistant for much longer. The subhead is good news for Apple users. Generative AI on Siri could be a thing as soon as next year. So Francois, I'll start with you, and then Raj, and then Chris, just to close us out. Siri has been maligned on this show every season since we started this back in 2017. I see this season's not going to be any different. But I do think it's funny, the source of this article, like I said, just with the animosity between the factions of Apple and Android. But my question for you is, do you agree? Do you think that Siri is going to be, do you think Apple, who's kind of waffled around with AI initiatives to date, do you think that they've got it in them to turn Siri into something that moves it to the front of the pack?
Yeah, I'm very biased on this one, Bradley, because the father of Siri is Luc Julia, who's a French engineer, and he's today a technical advisor to a group Renault, and part of the Alliance Renault Nissan. And so actually, and I have a couple of friends at Apple. So I think Apple woke up on those topics. Because they didn't really see the ecosystem value of having a really good, AI-powered speech assistant. Amazon did it, way ahead. So Amazon is ahead. I think, Apple has the capability of catching up, in my opinion. Just take the example of the maps, right? Google Maps versus, Apple Maps. Remember the early beginning of Apple Map. It was a disaster, right? They caught up and pretty well, right? And now they're integrating, a charging station for cars and really, value-added features that, drives the usage. So I think that on Siri, yes, I'm very confident that Apple can catch up. and they have the internal capabilities and skills to do so.
Excellent. Yeah, and Adam Chire, co-founder of Siri, is good friend of mine and good friend of several folks on this side. And he introduced me to Luke Julia once at an event, and just a fantastic man. I'm on that page, but still worth exploring. And so, Raj, I'm coming to you. Same question. Does interesting article, funny given the source, but does Apple have it in them to get Siri to where it needs to be?
Well, I'll answer the question with a question. Can it afford not to? And the answer is absolutely not, meaning they have to do it. There is no question Apple has to invest in generative AI and embed it within Siri. And I would have also asked what took Apple so long? This is a journey which is inevitable. Now let's look at a few numbers. So there are 500 million devices that are being used today that have Siri on them, but only 80 million use Siri. Now, if you have Gen AI in it, can that number double? Yeah, I don't see why not, because ChatGPT, reached million users in 5 days, and there are 180 billion users of ChatGPT today. So, sorry, not 180 billion, 180 million. And so the question is, will Apple get there? Absolutely. The article also says 2025. I think that's too late. The technology would have evolved greatly given the high level of adoption that Apple needs to get there in 24, given we have just a couple of months left in 23. And I gotta believe they are very close to being there, and this may not be accurate information given the source. That said, it is inevitable. It is going to happen. Apple needs to get there because they are the biggest company on the planet in terms of market cap, 2.7 trillion. And they have to protect their customer base. And so it's, again, inevitable, will happen.
No, I like that way of phrasing it. And Chris, I'm going to give you the last word. Interesting article, funny for the reasons we've noted. Is Apple going to do, are they capable of doing what they need to do to bring Siri where it needs to be?
Yeah, I think Raj said it really well. I had the same kind of impression. I've had that same impression about Siri for a long time. Maybe we could pretend Apple's really smart and they waited until there was a technology that could make assistants much better than they currently are, because I think the quality of their interaction with the assistants is going up very quickly as people embed these large language models on the back end. But yeah, I think it's going to become a standard way for us to interact with our devices. It's going to be just expected that we can talk to them and get reasonable answers. One of the things that I don't think is sorted out right now is exactly how you make an assistant interface with a language model. So, there's going from what someone says to doing something is not always super straightforward, but there's been tons of research on this and it's been making a lot of advances as well. And so, yeah, I think it's going to become a standard. And as far as time frame, I'm not 100% sure, but Apple has the resources required to do it in whatever time frame they want, essentially.
Excellent. So we've got an optimistic view on Apple. I agree with you, Raj, and I agree with all three of y'all. They have to is a better way to phrase it. So Raj, Chris, Francois, appreciate y'all taking the time to share your expertise, share your perspective, not just with me, but the audience as well. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
You got it. So for This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 8, thank you for listening on your podcast provider of choice. Thank you for watching if you've been watching us on YouTube. Until next time.